How is it going, everybody? And welcome back to another review for the anime adaptation for Tokyo Ghoul Episode 5, where we are smack dab in the middle of the auction raid arc. And I still can't believe that it's only taken us 2 episodes to reach the middle of the auction raid arc. This pacing honestly just amazes me. It makes me laugh to myself whenever I think about this adaptation. And I do believe that next week with episode 6, just judging by the pacing that we have had, episode 6 will most likely bring us to the conclusion of the auction raid arc. So this adaptation has taken 6 episodes to adapt 3 full volumes of Tokyo Ghoul 30 chapters in 6 episodes. Oh boy. But with all that being said, let's dive in and talk about episode 5 of Tokyo Ghoul. And I know I've been saying that I have enjoyed this episode, I have positives within this episode, but I should preface this right off the bat. Just because I'm saying that I have positives with this episode does not make this a good or great episode for Tokyo Ghoul. There are still negatives within this episode, but just for me and for my opinion, I had more positives to outweigh the negatives within this episode. When I'm looking at this episode, the main negatives that really stuck out to me are the character models and the animation. I think a lot of people harped on the decline in quality that we kind of saw with the animation within this episode when you compare it to episode 1 to episode 5. That's just to be expected with Studio Pierrot in the middle of their adaptation, so I was kind of expecting that. But also there's weird cuts going from scene to scene, but also going from scene to the main intro and then back into the main episode. It still felt very weird to me, kind of like they just threw that in there saying that's a good point just to put the intro in after our cold open. That really did feel weird to me. But also, there's like no context or emotion to the fights currently going on within the auction raid arc. We haven't built up any like character development or at least getting us attached to these characters long enough to be like, yeah, I'm attached to these characters and I don't want any of them to die, because currently right now in the anime adaptation, I don't care who lives or who dies. I just want to see something interesting happen to where I'm not just bored being like, can you make the fight scenes just a little bit more interesting? And the entire section with Naki within this episode, I honestly think was not needed in episode 5. And don't get me wrong, I love Naki as a character. He is dim-witted, he is fun, and just how he interacts with all the other characters, I really do love his character. But seeing how the adaptation for this episode portrayed him, getting to see Gagi and Gugi risk their lives to save him and they ended up dying, I'm like, I don't feel anything in this scene right now. And they made Naki look so pathetic as he was just crying there. Naki cries a lot. That is a part of his character. But at least in the manga, he started fodernizing a whole bunch of CCG investors, decapitating them, stabbing them, putting up a decent fight after these 2 people, Gagi and Gugi, protected him from dying. He at least started to kill some of the investigators before he ended up getting taken down and about to be executed. In this episode, we just see him crying the entire time after they protect him, and then there's this scene where CCG investigators surround him, and there's like a 5-second pause to where you're like, all right, when are these CCG investigators going to die? Because this is a long pause. They could have killed him by now, but we can definitely tell that the script mandated Naki get out of this alive. So those are really my main negatives for this episode. The Naki section I felt like had no emotion to it, and that sucks for me because I really do like that section within this arc where Naki kind of has to grieve a little bit for 2 of his subordinates that have been around since part 1 of Tokyo Ghoul, basically since his character introduction. But with all that being said, guys, let's wipe away the negatives, let's push them aside for right now, and let's actually talk about some of the positives or some of the decent moments that I actually liked and enjoyed within episode 5. I have them all written down right in front of me, that way I wouldn't miss out on talking about all the positives that I liked or enjoyed. But let's go in order of these. And the first one that definitely caught my eye right away within this episode was the title card sequence. And I can honestly say that every episode we've had thus far has had a very creative title card sequence. But this one really stood out to me because here we have Kane screaming very angrily at Heisei Sasaki because now she knows that is Heisei Sasaki right in front of her, the man that has caused Shu so much trouble that we've seen so far within Tokyo Ghoul. And as Kane is screaming, we see the title card pop up and just the kanji getting splattered with blood and then just envelops in the red blood color. that is really creative. I really did like that title card sequence, but it just makes me wish that more creativeness like that was implemented throughout this adaptation of Tokyo Ghoul. The music was also another big positive for me within this episode. That is mainly to be expected because the music in TG is always top quality, very good. I really enjoyed it within this episode, but I think my biggest positive throughout this entire episode came from Takizawa. I really did enjoy him in this episode. Getting to see him pop up, Pineapple Kun just screaming jam the entire time. Modernizing all of these CCG investigators. I really did enjoy Takizawa in this episode. The mood and the atmosphere that he brought to this episode, like I just stated, him saying jam, 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 jam. I love that in this episode. And the lecture talk that it actually adapted into this episode to where he has these two subordinates cornered in the bathroom and they recognize him as Takizawa. And they're like, we were in that lecture that you were talking to us about. And he's like, oh, you were that girl talking to your friend during the lecture. And she's like, yes, you remember me. And then just immediately gut right through the stomach with his arm and is basically like, don't talk during the lecture. I really did like that. But I think what made Takizawa so good for me in this episode came from his voice actor. You could tell Takizawa's voice actor was having a lot of fun voicing a different side of Takizawa in this adaptation, because in Route A, he kind of just got to do, you know, the rookie investigator, always follows the rules. It was kind of like a bland character in a way. But now he kind of gets to stretch his legs a bit and gets to act psychotic. And I just loved hearing his voice, getting to see his personality shine through and how demented of a character Takizawa has become, because I know many people, anime onlys included, have no idea how Takizawa is showing up right now in Tokyo Ghoul, and many people have been searching online looking for answers. I have a video up on my channel that I made a year ago. It's not a good video at all, but I made it talking about the backstory of Takizawa, and a lot of people have been watching that video, and it actually helped them a little bit coming to understand how Takizawa is popping up in Tokyo Ghoul, and realizing that people are still confused about Tokyo Ghoul, it kind of makes me wish that Season 1 and Season 2 were handled a little bit better. That way the anime onlys would not be confused about Takizawa showing up in this situation. So a big positive for Takizawa in this week's latest episode. But my next positive, I think, would honestly fall right below Takizawa. And strangely enough, it comes from Nutcracker in this week's latest episode. Besides the blatant fan service coming from her character with that skimpy outfit, which I'm amazed that they're actually able to adapt that because that's how she looks in the manga, her sections were actually very interesting to me because I love getting to see her just killing all of these fodder investigators because they cannot fight for shit. Their fight choreography is honestly pathetic at best, just watching them like, just basically walk into a room and be like, I can't see her. And then when they do see her, I'll shoot behind her. I'll cut like this. It's not that interesting. I kind of wish that they added more flair into the combat from the investigators because this is supposed to be the best of the best working the auction raid, but it's not all that interesting. But getting to see the detachable kagune coming from Nutcracker, now this is a new skill that we're learning about ghouls, but also getting to see the texture and how her kagune actually looked. It almost looked like foreskin coming out of her body. Like it had a very weird texture and color to it. I was like, does Nutcracker have a dick coming out of her back? Like that's honestly what it looked like. But this episode really did remind me that even though this adaptation can be hit or miss with a lot of people, the textures and the designs for the kagunes for each individual ghoul I find to be very interesting because I really found Nutcracker's to be interesting. Matsume's looked like a thorn bush when it actually got detached in that section when she went to go rescue Kane. So throughout this episode, I'm looking at the kagunes, I'm like, you know, the texture and just the overall uniqueness to each individual ghoul, I like what they're doing for this adaptation on the kagune standpoint. I just wish they could just add more creativity throughout this adaptation because they could do so much good stuff with this material. So talking about Nutcracker as a whole, I enjoyed her in this episode. And then I think the really only last bit that I really did enjoy was like getting to see Juzo and Urie kind of just taking out all of those ghouls down in the basement. But it led into one of the best moments from the manga that I think So many people love this panel so much. Getting to see Urie going after Big Madam. He's after that promotion, and then kind of gets taken out a little bit. And we see Mitsuki walk in, and we see Urie waist deep in the mouth of Big Madam. That was a highlight for me in this episode. Getting to see that adapted, I was like, oh, Urie. Oh, Urie. I love that section. Like, this man is going after promotion, but look where it got him. Waist deep in the mouth of a big ass woman. Or is that a woman? But the rest of the stuff that takes place within this episode, I think, is done pretty averagely. And honestly, that whole section with Uta and Hirako and the clowns fighting the investigators, I think was pretty much forgettable. And I really do hate that that is the case, because we get to see Bunjin choke out that big-ass clown Ghoul, and that is a huge feat for him, but I did not get that within this episode because they kind of cheaped out on that scene where they showed Bunjin in the grips of this Ghoul. They cut away, and we don't get to see how he gets out of that Ghoul's clutches, and then we just see him choking out this Ghoul, and he just breaks the neck, which is a pretty big feat because here's a human showing great strength, being able to suffocate and break the neck of a Ghoul who are like 10 times stronger than like the average human. So that right there is a big feat, but I don't think that came across as that within that section of the episode. But also the entire Uta and Hirako fight, there's so much being said within that section that I think flew over the heads of anime onlys, because that is hinting at a past chapter flashback we had in part 1 of the manga that would have been adapted into season 2 if it was adapted properly. So they don't understand the history that Uta and Hirako have, but we also do get to see the feat of Uta changing his face to Arima, but I think that was just kind of glossed over within this section. It's like, yeah, Uta changed his face, but I wonder how many people actually picked up on that fact in this episode. And then this episode mainly ends off with Haize about to go up against Owl. Takizawa was perfect in this part when he just started calling Eto that sly little bitch. I love that was actually kept as the dialogue. And it's hyping up right now, Haize versus Takizawa. And there's so much built into this fight that I absolutely love, going into the complexes that Takizawa has. But I don't think episode 6 is really going to dive into that all that much. We might just get surface level stuff. But there is just so much beneath the surface with Takizawa going up against Haize that goes back to Takizawa back in his cadet years when he used to battle basically for the top spot with Akira, which I'm very excited to see in next episode, but I'm very cautious because I don't know what they are in fact going to show in episode 6. But I guess get hyped for Haize versus Owl. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts, and this is my review on episode 5 of Tokyo Ghoul. Expect the conclusion of this arc coming next episode with episode 6. But it just still amazes me that in 6 episodes, we have covered 3 full volumes, 30 full chapters are about to be adapted into 6 episodes for Tokyo Ghoul. It just amazes me how fast this adaptation is going, but it's just par for the course at this point with Studio Pierrot. And I do know that we got the news that this adaptation is actually not going to be 12 episodes, but 24 episodes. As you guys can tell, I'm not overjoyed by this news, but it makes me very curious to see how the second core is going to be handled, because just by seeing the first core, how the adaptation is going, I am very curious just to see how the second core is going to be handled and what arcs are going to be adapted within that core, because the next arc after the Rosewald investigation is one of the longest arcs in Tokyo Ghoul. So that could cover, honestly, the other 12 episodes we are about to get. But at least with this episode, I was able to walk away with some positives, with Takizawa being that shining glimmer of hope just within this episode alone. But I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts on this episode. Leave those down in the comments below. But even though I may not be positive with the anime adaptation, at least I still have the manga week to week, which will be returning this week after Golden Week. So if you guys are fans of the manga, definitely join me for my manga live reactions and reviews. I enjoy that a lot more than I do with the Tokyo Ghoul anime adaptation. And I would love to talk with you guys about the manga of Tokyo Ghoul. So definitely join me over in those videos. That's going to do it for me, guys. So until next week, when we have episode 6 of Tokyo Ghoul, I'll talk to you guys next time.